question or a comment about some of your vision concerns, and as the conversation goes on, we might broaden it a little bit. Feel free to give us a call at 787-1970. And Dr. Thomas, always our pleasure having you in. How you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me in today.
All right. Well, look, I've got a question here about people who have contact lenses. Now, look, if I would like to get a prescription copy of my contact lens, the copy of the prescription that you prescribe, can I get that? If I wanted to take it somewhere else and say, hey, let me get some contact lenses if I didn't want to get them from Dr. Thomas.
Well, not from me, and not from any of the other doctors in my office, and not from 70% of the doctors in the state of Texas. So most eye doctors are not going to do that.
And you would not give me a prescription of my own, of whatever you're prescribing for me. You won't do that.
Not usually. I mean, anybody would make exceptions, and I have done it on
Created
occasion.
with free version for non-commercial
people
use.
that are traveling, people that have worn the same kind of lens for a number of years and have proved that they can be successful with it. There'll be a few cases where you would release a contact lens prescription, but most of the time, no. Just somebody saying, I want it, please give it to me, that's usually not going to be a good
Even if these are my own eyes I'm talking about.
I understand. And we've talked about this before, the reason being, and the reason we kind of brought it up is that, interestingly enough, almost a week and a half ago, there was a front-page article on the Dallas Morning News about these contact lens prescriptions, and they were faulting the eye doctors. The Consumers Report people did a study, and they faulted the eye doctors, saying that the eye doctors are trying to make a bunch of money keeping the contact lens prescriptions and not allowing patients to test the waters and go out into the open market and buy contact lenses from other places or purchase contact lenses through mail order houses, this kind of thing. And again, we've talked about this a few times, and I had a few patients ask me about it. Of course, we always talk about it before it hits the paper.
Created with free version for non-commercial
use. And I just kind of wanted
use.
to go through it again because I did have some patients kind of come in and charge me up about it. They were long-time patients. I don't know if they were messing with me or not, but they said, yeah, I read that article. I know you're not going to give me my contact lens script. The article says you jacked all the prices up. Is that true? And I'm like, no, that's not true.
But is there a law or some liability that stops you all from giving me a prescription for how you're treating my own eyes?
Well, what the law states is that it is up to the individual doctor whether he or she decides to release that contact lens prescription. Okay. That's what the law states, is that it's the doctor's decision, regardless of the patient's wishes. And we have explained why, and I'll explain to the listeners once again why, is that because in the state of Texas, as it is in the majority of the states, opticians, which are non-licensed professionals, generally people that have been to some kind of apprentice program, on-the-job training, at most maybe a year or two of a junior college program. Very rarely would you see a
created with free version for non-commercial use.
Master degree optician. Opticians in the state of Texas, people that sell glasses, adjust glasses, people that work at optical chains like a Lens Crafters or a Pearl Vision Center. I've got 2 certified opticians in my office. So, I mean, it's a whole professional category. To be an optician is a career move. Opticians have training in contact lenses as far as dispensing them, explaining to patients, how to do things, how to take care of them, teaching people how to insert and remove them. And opticians are able to dispense contact lenses. You can go into a Lens Crafter store or a Pearl Vision store or Sam's Optical or any number of places where there is no doctor, but there are opticians, and purchase contact lenses in the state of Texas if you give the optician a fully detailed written contact lens prescription. The issue is that if something goes wrong, and we have talked before about how sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes people wear contact lenses and they develop complications. Sometimes these complications are severe.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Historically, whenever contact lenses were dispensed by an optician and the doctor was not involved in that loop and serious complications developed, the lawyers, and you've heard me say the lawyers 100 times on this show, the lawyers go after the doctor because the doctor signed the prescription. Regardless of whether the doctor dispensed the lens or not, regardless of whether the patient came back to the doctor and said, Doc, I'm having a problem, my eye's hurting and it's red, none of that matters. Once the signature is put on the prescription, the doctor is legally responsible for the patient, the way the laws are in the state of Texas.
Well, doesn't that seem a little bit unfair?
Well, yeah, it's unfair to the doc. All the pressure's on the doc to maintain the patient's good eye health, regardless of whether the patient is stupid or follows instructions or got the right lens or got the wrong lens. And what eye doctors know, Just like what black people know, how we've always talked about how black people know when they're being oppressed, and how white people never seem to understand it.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Know that this is real because it's real. All the eye doctors know that this is real because it is real. And what has happened several times in this country is that patients have gone out, obtained contact lenses through non-traditional means, developed serious eye problems, had miserable things happen to them, losing eyes, going blind in an eye, the worst case scenario. No fault of the doctor at all. And the lawyers come in and they have been able to repeatedly get the doctor on the hook, obtain large judgments against the doctors, multi-million-dollar judgments, the kind where your malpractice goes up, the kind where your malpractice gets canceled, the kind of nightmare that no doctor wants to go through, especially when the doctor wasn't at fault. And once that happens 5, 6, 7 times, some $8 million award up in Minnesota or something, well, it gets reported in all the eye doctor journals. All the eye doctors are now scared to death because they know that if something goes wrong, and if this patient doesn't listen to you,
with free version
and if this
for
patient calls
non-commercial
a lawyer,
use.
you're going to lose. That's what the doctors
But
know.
the consumer groups are saying, well, that may be true, but consumers deserve a right to have the right to choose how much money they want to spend for those lenses, regardless of who's doing the prescription.
Well, and I agree with that. And what this article does highlight is that there are wide variations in contact lens cost. And what the consumer will have to do is simply find somebody that is fair and is charging a reasonable price. It does not have to be the lowest price. It needs to be a reasonable price. If you call up 10 people and they say a pair of contacts is $40, and you call up the 11th and he says it's $110, well, he's too high. And you may have to spend a little bit of time doing that. And especially, again, if it's somebody that's not going to release the contact lens prescription, you need to know if those contact lenses are going to cost $40 a pair, or if he's going to jack them up and charge $110 a pair. You need to make that decision before you go. You need to get that information before you go. If they can't tell you, something's wrong.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
We're talking at this time with Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care. And if you have a question about your vision, anything like that, feel free to give us a call, 787-1970, 787-1970. I think we've got to pause right now for a break, and maybe we'll kind of broaden the conversation, talk about a little consumerism issues here when we get back from a medical standpoint, 787-1970. And of course, we're going to have to let Dr. Thomas get on his soapbox and talk about Susan Smith and O.J. Simpson, and even a comment or two about that Westcliff Mall situation. We'll be back with more right after this.
Introducing...
And welcome back to 97 KHVN's Community Forum. I'm Robert Ashley, and want to thank you for being with us. Don't forget about the big Family Enrichment Week that's going to be going on all week long over at Kimball High School. And we're going to be trying to check in with Dr. Clarence Walker of Clarence Walker Ministries, who we had a chance to talk to last week, but he's in town all week long. And I understood that
created with free version for non-commercial use.
Sermon there the other day over at Friendship West, but don't forget it gets underway tonight at 6:30 at Kimball High School. But with us at this time, Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care, 787-1970. That's our number to call if you have questions or comments about your vision concerns. O.J. Simpson, Susan Smith, Westcliff Mall. Feel free now. We can broaden this thing up a little bit. 787-1970. That's our number to call. Now, Doc, just before we get into some of these social issues, and before you get on your soapbox there, because a lot of people are beginning to say, is that the doctor that really speaks his mind? I say, well, that's Dr. Craig Thomas. Now, about not enough doctoring and too much doctoring when it comes down to dealing with medical industry.
Well, we did a show back in December where I actually brought in a live patient. It was the first time we'd done that, and we went through the scenario where people get too much doctoring. A lot of the early shows that we did concentrate on educating the black population so that black patients would know when they were not getting the proper service, when black patients would know when they were getting too short
Created
of a visit,
with free version for non-commercial
when there were
use.
not the appropriate diagnostic tests being performed, when the treatment options were not being explained thoroughly. We've gone through that where it seemed like most of the time the problem was not enough doctoring, where there was racism and prejudice in the healthcare delivery system. What I've seen, too, through the years is the alternative, where there's too much doctoring. And rarely does that happen to anybody that's poor or old or black. It's happening to people that has insurance and money. The biggest cases that I have seen tend to be young professional people. Again, that have good jobs, good benefits. Okay. They can go to the doctor all the time. There's no financial disincentive. And I had a visit Friday with a longtime friend of mine, a lady I went to college with. She didn't want me to say her name, but a longtime friend of mine, a person that I had examined several times through the years. And she's an engineer. She's a very educated woman, several college degrees. She's sharp. And
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
And we've talked before how the insurance changes year by year, where people have to go to these closed panels where they have to go to certain doctors where they can't use their insurance. So she's not stupid. If she can go one place and spend $5 or come to my place and spend $60, well, she's going to go spend $5, as long as the service is about the same. And I saw her Friday for the first time in 5 years, professionally. When we were doing eye exam. And she told me that during that 5 years, I said, what's been happening the past 5 years, eyeball-wise? She says, well, I've been going to this ophthalmologist over here in Arlington, and she gave me his name. And I said, well, is everything okay? Because everything was okay when I saw her. She says, yeah, well, he thought I might have had glaucoma. And I said, well, you don't have glaucoma. You didn't 5 years ago. And I started rummaging through my records, and I'd seen her 2 or 3 times, enough to make the determination that she did not have glaucoma. And I said, well, what happened during your visit? She says, I went several times, and they would do these visual field tests and take a bunch of pictures and check my pressure all the time. And I said, well, was there ever anything wrong? She says, no, I was always fine.
Created with free version for non-commercial
use. Was
use.
your pressure ever high? And remember, glaucoma is when the pressure is too high. And she says, no, he told me that my pressure was actually lower than average. And I said, that's right. As I was looking through my charts, your pressure is lower than average. You're about the furthest person from a glaucoma suspect that you could be. It's almost impossible. The pressure's too low. And so I said, well, what caused all these visits and workups and tests and things? And she says, well, when I did my first exam with him, he told me that I had what's called deep physiological cups. And a physiological cup is part of the optic nerve that is inside the eye. And when an eye doctor is trying to determine whether a patient has glaucoma or not, that's one of the diagnostic indicators, is to examine that nerve, evaluate its appearance, determine the cup depth. That's something that you look at when you're figuring out if someone has glaucoma. Black people have deep physiological cups. It is a physical characteristic of black
Created
people.
with free version for non-commercial
Black people
use.
have other physiological characteristics. Black people tend to have broad noses. Black people tend to have full lips. My wife always says that the big butt thing is the genetic. She's trying to lose weight. Say, I can't do it because I'm black. I can't get rid of. There's certain physiological traits that are consistent in a lot of black people. And I recall many lectures in eye doctor school about the professors teaching us that black people have deep physiological cups. It is normal for black people to have this appearance. They do not all have glaucoma. Any eye doctor knows this. Any eye doctor knows this. It's a basic thing. I have seen now 2 situations where an eye doctor takes that information and contorts it to scare the patient into thinking that there's some real problem. And then they launch into this series of diagnostic tests, generating fees that should not be generated, examinations that are unnecessary, spending time and money when it is not
Created with free
necessary,
version for non-commercial
doing
use.
too much doctoring. And so this doctor had my friend come back several times over several years, doing all of these extensive tests, all of this extra work. She's not really hesitant because she ain't paying for none of it. Her insurance is paying for all of it. All she got to do is pay that $10 visit. It's one of these closed panel PPO kind of deals. So she's paying $10 whether she's there 5 minutes or 55 minutes. And so she don't care. And then finally, after about 3 or 4 years of this, he goes ahead and tells her, I guess you're normal. We don't have to do this anymore.
Well, how much money has he made in the process?
Thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars.
So you think people with good insurance need to be on guard of medical price gouging to a certain extent?
I think that black people need to be aware that there are unscrupulous eye doctors that will look inside their eye, tell them that they have deep physiological cups, and that they might have glaucoma, and do a bunch of expensive tests on them. That's what I think is going to happen to a lot of people. And it is not a good thing. There's no
Created
harm
with free
being
version
done
for non-commercial
as
use.
opposed to the alternative where you're not, the first round where you don't get enough doctoring, people are dying and getting sick when they not supposed to. Well, there you've actually got harm being done physically. On this other side, there's no harm being done, but it's the time, the money, the emotional stress, somebody going home, gee, am I going to go blind? Do I have glaucoma? You're not supposed to tell people they're going to go blind if they're not going to go blind.
Especially with low pressure like
Yeah,
that.
and for her to, and again, she's an intelligent woman, an educated woman. For her, and she remembers specifically. I said, your pressure's always been very low. And she goes, he told me that. He told me my pressure was lower than normal, but that I had these deep cups and he had to check it out. And so, the analogy would be, there's a condition called pseudotumor cerebri that obese middle-aged black women get more than anybody else. We've talked about all these problems that black people get.
Okay.
This pseudotumor cerebri, about 80% of the people that get it are overweight black women. 30 to 40 years old. I mean, it's a real narrow defined
Created
thing.
with
Just like
free
Jewish
version
people
for
get
non-commercial
Tay-Sachs
use.
disease, certain people get certain things, okay? Big black girls get this pseudotumor cerebri. And it's a brain tumor. I have seen 3 patients with it in my 12 years, so it's not a real common thing. But it is real serious. The only way to diagnose it is to do a bunch of visual field tests, CAT scans of the head, all kind of wild stuff, okay? If I launched into this diagnostic workup every time I saw a heavy-set black lady, I'd have a shuttle bus going back and forth to the hospital, doing brain scans and MRIs all day long. You can't do this stuff every time someone that fits one risk factor criteria comes into the office. But that's what some of these guys are doing. And again, people that have heard me on the radio for 5 years, well, they're on the alert, like the lady was in December, where she realized, gee, something's wrong. This lady here thought it was goofy enough to where she wanted to bring it up. She didn't have the same negative feelings this other patient we brought in December, but she thought it was kind of strange, especially since I had seen her several
Created
times
with
and never
free
even
version for
mentioned
non-commercial
it as a
use.
potential problem. So this stuff is happening, and it's not poor people, it's not uneducated people. Then, well, Ms. Smith, you've got glaucoma. We need to do $800 worth of tests to see how bad it is. Your insurance is going to cover all but $600, and you pay the rest. Okay, because the doctor's telling you.
I mean, you got fear of going blind on top of that. You're afraid.
So, just another example. Again, I'd never make any of these stories up. And if I could keep someone from going through what my friend just went through for 3 years, going to the doctor all the time, doing a bunch of tests, getting your eyes dilated all the time, worrying if you really got glaucoma or not, get a second opinion.
Okay. All right, and once again, if you're just joining us, we're talking at this time with Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care, and 787-1970, that's our number to call. If you have a question about some of your vision concerns, feel free now to give us a call at 787-1970.
Created with free version for non-commercial
another
use.
quick question. Let's go to Ellie, who's standing by on line 1, and then I'll come back and ask you about surgery and office visits. Ellie, you're on with Dr. Thomas.
I heard Dr. Thomas make a statement about he's tired of policemen raising kids. He didn't say nothing about that kid down there in Midlothian that stayed that killing when they put that narcotic agent on there. His daddy was a chief of police. But what he was referring to, them kids in that mall over there. That mall is responsible for them for what happened to them kids. They don't have to beat no kids. Them kids ain't no hoodlums. And that lady should file a $50 million lawsuit against that mall. And that jury put a lien on there until they get that mess straight. And that doctor ain't got no business calling them kids no hoodlum. And I'm going to hang up the list.
All right, thank you very much. There, L.A. Doctor, you want to qualify your comments, or did L.A. hear you correctly? Or?
Well, he heard me 100% correct, so he got good hearing. That thing he's referring to back in Midlothian, that was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, that boy Knighton.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
He was the policeman's son. I've seen that mess several times down on jury duty. You get some young burglar in there. I remember last time I was down there, it was some little 17-year-old white boy from Mesquite, and his daddy was a policeman, and they came in there, and he had his full dress blue uniform on and his little pretty blonde wife in there trying to invoke that sympathy thing. And I'm saying, you got a policeman and this boy's a criminal, put them both in jail. He ain't got no home training. I'm tired of saying it. These kids got no home training. Obviously, that boy down there in Midlothian didn't have no home training, and he's rotting away in jail where he's supposed to be right now. Now, as far as these hoodlums over here at West Cliff Mall, whether it was a first offense, repeat offense, they hoodlums, period. You got criminal intent. You got boys out in the middle of the night stealing. There's no way you can explain it any other way. They were stealing. They're criminals. This wrong. I mean, there's nothing else to say. And whether they did it once or did it 10 times, 13-year-old people
Created
that are out
with
there
free
stealing,
version for non-commercial use.
that's a bad sign. They turn the wrong way. They are down the path of evil and darkness, and they perhaps can be turned. I told you when I was driving over here, I was talking to my white optometrist friend out in Grand Prairie. He listens in now. I always call him up and tell him I'm going to go. And he asked me what I'm going to talk about today. I said, it just depends. He says, are you going to talk about those Nation of Islam boys? I said, well, I called in a couple of weeks ago. I gave a comment and it generated some controversy. And he says, well, if you get to talking about it, tell them that they need to send some white guys out here so they can start beating up all these little white hoodlums living in Grand Prairie. And I guarantee you the sentiment of the public is that they want punishment. They are tired of these criminals. They are tired of the police catching them and letting them go, the judges letting them go. I lived 2 blocks from Carter High School. I know what I say when I say police raise some kids. When the police come to somebody's house 20 times in 2 years, they're raising somebody's kids. We
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
I'd rather the police raise these kids, put them in the youth commission to where they don't be breaking my windows out. I got my office broken into 3 weeks ago for the 4th time in the past 2 years. The 4th time in the past 2 years. I have been held up at gunpoint in my life 3 times. I've had my car stolen twice. I've had windows broke out of my automobiles no matter where I park. I am a crime victim. Crime victims don't like criminals in any way, shape, or form. I got no compassion for criminals. I just don't care. I tell the legislators, take my money and build some prisons and put these boys under jail. I don't want to see them. I don't care about them. I don't care about their families. I just don't care. Now, I know that's not the Christian way to be.
But you've been victimized.
I've been victimized. And I try to live a Christian life. I got a lady, I was getting ready to sue. I got a lady owe me $300. The insurance company sent her my money, and she won't give it to me. And I done already wasted $55 down at small claims court trying to get my money back.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
And I was debating whether I was going to spend a couple of $100 more and put a lien on a house and all that kind of stuff. And I swear to you, Robert, I was thinking about this yesterday morning because I was camping and I didn't get to go to church yesterday.
Yes, indeed.
And I said, I need to have some Christian ideals here. And I decided yesterday morning I was not going to pursue this lady anymore. I was going to ease off. I was going to let her steal my $300 and just move forward and try and forgive and forget. But I can't forgive and forget all these other criminals. I just can't do it.
Okay, let's take some calls here. Once again, we're talking with the outspoken Dr. Craig Thomas. Also, we're talking about social issues as well as some of the medical concerns if you have questions about your vision. Let's go to Dr. Williams, who is on line 3. And Dr. Williams, thank you for calling.
Yes, I'd just like to say to Dr. Craig.
Yes, ma'am.
I did tell you, I'm with you. Everything you just said, I say amen to it. I feel the same way. They are hoodlums. They need to do something with them.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Come on the air. You need to say that, and every time I speak, I'm saying the same thing. We are tired of these hoodlums. We are tired of these criminals with those criminal minds. They need to be reared because that is something that their parents are not doing. Keep on doing the good things that you are doing, and for God's sake, keep on standing up and speaking the truth.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for calling in. All right, let's see what's on Nail's mind on line 2. And Nail, thank you for calling. You're on with Dr. Craig Thomas. Nail? Nail. Are you there, Nail? Well, I guess Nail didn't hear the bell. All right, let's go to Mary. And let's see what's on Mary's mind. And Nail, you can call us back now. Mary, you're on Heaven 97. Mary?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead. You're on Heaven 97. Okay, Mary's on a car phone. I guess Mary's hit one of those bad sales.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You're kind of breaking up, but go right ahead, please.
I just wanted to say I've listened to Dr. Craig, and I am...
Oh, yes.
Created with free version for non-commercial
use.
use.
What, Mary, if you get back and get to another line there, yeah, that cell is kind of coming in and out on her. But I tell you what, Doc, you really, I didn't know you had been victimized 3 times.
Oh, good point. I've had the double-barrel sawed-off shotgun on my forehead.
Okay, now, could you see these criminals? Who were the criminals?
I was a Burger King manager for 8 years, and I was robbed a couple of times at Burger King restaurants working at night. I've been held up on the street before. I've been there.
I mean, they held a sawed-off shotgun to your head?
Right there.
Oh, man.
I mean, your life is passing before your eyes, and you're trying to open the safe as fast as you can,
Okay. I'll tell you what, let's pause right now for a break, and we'll come back and talk more with Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care right after this. Save Welcome back to 97 KHVN's Community Forum. I'm Reverend Ashley. Right now we're talking with Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care. And also don't forget now there's a family wellness event and Job Fair 95 that's going to be taking place July 15th at the Tarrant County
Created
Convention
with
Center.
free version for non-commercial use.
So put that on your calendar there, so therefore you might be able to find out more about family wellness as well as get yourself gainfully employed. Also want to say hello to everybody associated with the National Baptist Convention of America. Dr. E. Edward Jones and company, he's the president there out of Shreveport, Louisiana, pastor of the Galilee Baptist Church. They'll be coming to Dallas in September, and we're going to be reaching out and doing a lot of shows surrounding that. And just want to say hello to everybody in the listening audience associated with the National Baptist Convention of America. But 787-1970, that's our number to call. And Dr. Craig Thomas, we've got lots of people standing by. But by the way, how can people reach you if they need to get some vision concerns taken care of?
My office is over in Southwest Dallas, close to Redbird Mall. The phone number is 780-7199. And we're there 6 days a week.
All right, and let's go to Greg, who is on line 3. And Greg, you're on with Dr. Thomas.
How you doing, Robert?
Hey there, Greg.
I want to say hi to Dr. Thomas.
Hello, sir.
First of all, I commend you. I'm 110% behind you. First of all, I
Created with
appreciate
free
you
version
being a
for
professional
non-commercial
man
use.
and speaking and being outspoken as you are. I've been hearing you over the years, and I just have much love for you. Secondly, I have a friend, we're going to be burying him on Wednesday, was a victim, Robert.
Yes.
And Dr. Craig, he was a victim of things, you know, people say my dog, my homeboy, my food. He wasn't none of it. He was my friend. He was my friend, Robert. I want people to know his name was Eddie Ramsey.
Well, what happened, Greg?
Robert, he was shot in the back coming in the house about 3 years ago, Robert.
Wow.
Shot. Okay. In the results, okay, his dad passed away 2 weeks ago. Good Christian man. I mean, he was like in his 80s. And I told the family yesterday, I told Earl, I said, we may not understand, I said, but your mother and God know what's going on. But Robert, Eddie was shot in the back, going in the house.
For what?
Don't nobody know.
I mean, has there been anybody
Created with
arrested?
free version for non-commercial use.
As far as I know, I don't think so, Robert. But anyway, he died on last Thursday. And Dr. Thomas is talking about being Robert, we're being victimized. And in results, you got good people dying because of these people. I'm like Dr. Thomas. Take my money and build prison. Take my money, do what you have to do to get a message out to these young hoodlums. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and if they fall into that type of lifestyle, there will be hoodlums also. I'm happy and then I'm sad. But at the same time, Robert...
Well, now, Greg, you know that a couple of years ago when Commissioner Price and Senator West were holding public hearings regarding building a jail out there in Hutchins, everybody was against it.
Well, I wasn't against it.
All right,
I wasn't against that, but my point is we have to do something to stop this type of nonsense, Robert.
All right, Greg.
Those who want to criticize the doctor, they need to move around and just, let it happen to them.
Created with
Greg,
free
we
version
express
for
our
non-commercial
condolences regarding
use.
your friend, and thank you so much for calling in and stay on the case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, let's see what's on. Let's go to Ron on line 2, and Doc, we're going to come back and let you kind of talk about the victimization aspect. But Ron, you're on with Dr. Craig Thomas.
Hey, Robert. How you doing, Dr. Thomas?
Pretty good.
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Thomas, I worked at Louis Flowers Health Center.
Yes.
We used to come over there. You and the other optometrists used to come by. And you and the other optometrists used to come by and do eye exams. Well, I have a prescription, and I know it's time for me to have another eye exam.
Okay.
My glasses, I feel like they're not effective because my eyes are beginning to hurt some. You had a little deal you were doing with the clinic, people who employ you at the clinic. Is that still available? Or?
Yeah. I saw an employee of the clinic this morning, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Just call and schedule an appointment, and we'll work under that same schedule that we did before.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I wanted.
Okay.
Keep up the good work. God bless.
Thank you.
All right, Ron, thank you for calling. God bless you now. All right, we've got Sharon on the line here, and let's see what's on Sharon's mind. Sharon, thank you for calling. You're on with Dr.
Created
Thomas.
with free version for non-commercial use.
Hello.
My question is, a lot of the coverage on the O.J. Simpson trial, now that the prosecution has rested,
Yes.
from my views and from my understanding, every time I see it on ABC, NBC, it's always negative. He's got to be guilty. If he is guilty, that's one thing. But we'll just not let the defense put on their case. The defense can't be called a good team of lawyers. They got to be called the dream team. What do you think about this? And I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'll answer that from a journalistic standpoint. There's just a lot of bias in the establishment media, and it seems like they've already tried to convict O.J. Simpson, despite the fact the defense hadn't put on their case. But it's typical of the media, and there's institutional bias in the establishment media, and that's why some of us choose to deal with it. Some of us choose not to deal with it. But Dr. Thomas, are you convinced that the media is covering
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
I'm convinced that your statement is correct regarding institutional bias and racism. The same attitude prevails in the healthcare industry. The same attitude prevails in any American industry. You know, it is endemic in this country, is that racism and prejudice affect these significant decisions always.
And that's not to say that all whites or all white men are biased.
Yeah, there's good white guys out there.
Because you've got some black journalists who are just as biased in their reporting as other people. So I think it's a human thing.
That part of it I agree with. And as harsh as I feel on this OJ thing, and I think I said on the air a few months ago, I think he's guilty. Mm-hmm. And I base that on the wife beating history. Wife beating is a crime. It's a violent crime. Mm-hmm. It's no different than armed robbery to me.
But then again,
except the victim's always the same. You got one victim over and over.
Now you're going to always have those who say just because a man beats his wife, does that mean he's capable of murdering her?
Beating his wife is wrong. It's
true.
It's as wrong as these kids stealing in the middle of the night. That's just wrong. You can't rationalize it. There's no way you can say this big old strong football player is supposed to beat up this little girl. Now, you can put all kind of stuff in there where he was paying for it, that was his woman, all of this, all of that. And I understand that behavior, but she didn't deserve to die, if indeed he did it. So I don't want to get too deep into the OJ thing, but I think that wife beating history is extremely negative, and you simply cannot overlook that. The history is extremely negative, and I can't stress that enough. I think it's inappropriate to beat your wife.
All right. I agree with that too. Now, I don't want anybody to
and again, maybe if it was a one-timey thing, fine, but there appears to be consistent history there.
Yeah. And the first wife didn't leave for nothing.
And then as far as the other caller talking about the prison, we talked about prisons a little bit when that stuff was happening. I say take my money, build 200 prisons. I don't want them down the street for me. I want them prisons where they supposed to be, which is out in the country, in the heat, far away from everybody. And if you remember when they was talking about building a prison down there, because that's where my home is, that's where my business is, I don't want no prison 5 miles from my home. I don't want no prison 5 miles from my business. I want some nice restaurants and some hotels and some factories that don't pollute the environment. You can put all that stuff down there, but putting some prison where you're going to have a bunch of people making minimum wage, that ain't going to do nothing. I don't want to see no criminals in my neighborhood. You ship them out to West Texas, you put them out in East Texas and clear some fields. They can bring them chain gangs as far as I care. Don't want no prisons in my neighborhood. Right. Don't care about the families that got to go visit the prisoners. I've already said that. And if that was the reason, was supposedly to facilitate the relatives to see the criminals and ease their transition back into. Don't nobody want to hear that mess. We don't care.
All right, we're talking with Dr. Craig Thomas now. He's been a victim of crime. Somebody put a double-barrel shotgun to his head, so understand his feelings. Now, we're going to pause right now for a break. We'll come back and talk with Mary and Marty right after this. Welcome back to
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
A couple more minutes to go in the program. We're talking right now with Dr. Craig Thomas of First Eye Care. And let's see what's on Mary's mind, who has been standing by. Coming up at 1 o'clock, Dr. Richard Davidson of the Marvin Chiropractic Clinic. Mary, you're on with Dr. Davidson.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Smith. Dr. Craig Thomas. Who's this Smith and Davidson? Okay, here we go. Go right ahead, Mary.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Normally, when I listen to you on Heaven 97, I try to catch each one of these every day at my lunch break. When I hear you, I have been known to just get really upset, try to get on the car phone to get through, because you sometimes get, to me, a little extravagant, a little left wing or whatever. But today, I had to tell you, I totally agree with you, especially on this situation with Westcliff Mall. I have a problem with understanding why. I'm wondering what kind of signals we're sending these kids, okay? They have been punished for what they did. What they did was wrong. What they did was criminal. Would the mother have
created with free version for non-commercial use?
Call the police and had them, if they had been beaten in the city or county jail or in the juvenile detention center, we wouldn't have heard about all this. No one has acknowledged the fact that it hurt the business owner. Even though she's a business owner, the woman doesn't have a lot of money. You know, she's invested. She's an older lady. She's invested all she's got in this business, and I mean, you know, who's gonna pay for what she's had to lose? The owner of the mall himself has been robbed. He's been victimized. But I mean, that news didn't go nationwide. Only when these kids come up there and out of something wrong, they're getting all this national publicity. What kind of message are we sending to them? Well, you're saying, well, okay, let's put them away. They should be put away. Well, of course, the charges have been dropped against them, so they have the opportunity to go out and do something like this again, knowing that they have a parent that's going to stand behind them, right or wrong. So I mean, it's very confusing to me because out of
Created with
wrong,
free version for non-commercial
they're
use.
They're going to sue and possibly get money or whatever it is they're looking for, and it just makes no sense to me. I don't understand. The system is not working. Even if we put them away, all they're going to do is learn new techniques and, you know, come out and do possibly even worse things.
All right, Mary. Well, I tell you what, Mary, you just stay right there. I mean, well, we're going to hang up on you just for a second here because we've got to get ready to pause and go off into our different hour here. And Dr. Craig Thomas is going to stay with us for some additional time because we just got a message here that Dr. Davidson is stuck in traffic right now. So we've got Marty and MT on the line with us, and we need to pause right now just for a break. And I tell you what, Doctor, if you can hold that thought and answer Mary's question on the flip side, because Mary says it seems like she's getting mixed messages from the criminal justice system, the institutional systems that we have in our country here. But let's go ahead and pause for this break. Marty, you and MT stay right there. We're going to pause for a brief break, and we'll be back with Dr. Davidson. If you're out there listening, we'll just kind of hold it down for you until you make it here, and we hope that the traffic is not too difficult out there.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Some pretty tough comments here about the Westcliff Law. You have people so moved by your comments until they just grab and for all sorts of payphones to get up and challenge you. Now, and you're pretty tough on criminals because you've been a victim of crime. And I think just kind of reiterate your victimization here.
Well, my perspective is historical. I grew up in Los Angeles for a significant part of time. I spent 6 years in L.A. I had exposure to all the gangs out there. This was back in the early 70s. They had the Crips, the Family, the Pyru. You know, these were the real gangsters, not these little Rudy Poot kind of guys you see around here. They would come on the school buses and terrorize us. I knew these guys. I grew up with them. Like I said, I had my first pistol barrel put on me at age 12. A guy stole a pizza from me. I'm walking home from the pizza thing, and he comes up and snatches my pizza with a gun. So, I mean, I've been victimized. We could stay here for 12 hours, and people would start calling in, listing the times that they've been victimized. People are tired of it.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
She said she's frustrated. The most important thing, I even wrote it down, the thing she said, the system is not working. I believe that strongly. That's why this is such a big deal, is because it kind of galvanized everybody to once again see so openly that the system is not working. Let's say that these Nation of Islam brothers had not beat these kids up, and they'd have called the police, like one of the callers suggested earlier. Well, the police would have picked them up, they'd have took them down. Those kids would have been back with the worthless mama before them boys had finished their paperwork. And everybody knows that's true. The police know it's true. The boys know it's true. They got no fear of getting caught because they know they'll be home in time for cornflakes, as they say. Everybody is simply tired of it. Everybody, meaning the law-abiding, tax-paying citizens of this country, are tired of it. Whether they're black or white, the people are tired of it.
How drastic, and this is my last question, we're going to get Marty's call, how drastic do you
Created
think we
with
need to
free
get this
version for
country to
non-commercial
get a
use.
handle on crime?
I don't know. Again, what I have said several times is I almost think it's too late for the current generation. I don't have the answer. I don't really think the answer is incarcerating everybody, but I'd rather them be incarcerated than breaking out my car window. I think the answer would probably be to educate them, but we don't have the resources for that, apparently. The parents, once they exhibit the lack of ability to parent, that's not a skill that is generally going to be learned. If you don't have it, you don't have it. You don't see people go from being worthless parents to being excellent parents, generally.
So are we just stuck in this country?
Well, what I said before, and I'll say it again, is I said you put all these boys in jail, and we start over. And you got to start with these 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, keep them from having these babies. You got to teach them that the men are worthless and they're going to impregnate them for no reason. And the statistics show that a significant percentage of these hoodlums, these out-of-control hoodlums,
created with free version for non-commercial use,
out at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, they typically are products of single-family homes. The father is absent, the mother can't control them. I'm simply tired of hearing it. And I don't have an answer for how do we save the 13-year-old, because I'm not a social worker, but I say let's put that 13-year-old in jail if we got to, and go find his 3-year-old sister and try and educate her so she don't have a baby when she's 13 and start the thing all over again. And then secondarily, and this is where people get mad at me, and I'm sure this is where Mary gets mad, is because I always ignore the men. I always say that, the men are worthless, put them off to the side, put them under the jail, and my wife just goes ballistic every time she hears it. Obviously, Mary goes ballistic. I know people go ballistic every time they hear me say the men are worthless, the women are stupid, but I keep saying it because it's true.
All right, let's take Marty's call here, and Marty, thank you for holding on. You're on with Dr. Craig Thomas.
Yeah, how you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, Marty. How about yourself?
All right. First, I want him to understand. I understand what being a victim is. I was victimized.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Period.
That's a lot.
Quite a bit, and especially in a short period of time. And when after the second time that your wife leaves because she's scared of coming into the house, it's quite a bit. The other thing that I want you to know is that even though I'm sure I got upset just like any other man would, I was very upset. I never left the home. Matter of fact, I unlocked all the doors, unlocked all the windows, and wish somebody would come in there, especially after my family and my wife and kids left, because I wanted to kill them. That was my first thing. But that's not the solution. When I hear you talking about the being ignorant, these young boys ignorant, that makes me go a little ballistic too, because do you have any boys?
I got 2 boys.
I'm glad you do, because you're talking about your boys. So you take care of yours, right? I'm taking care of mine, so we got to help these that don't have someone to take care of. Do you work in any type of, not work, I know you work in your business and stuff, but are you affiliated with any type of community activities where we can help these children out? Do you ever go to a church and work with a vacation Bible?
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
To help these children who are 13, 14, and I'm talking about the teenagers, not 3 and 4 you were talking about that weekend out. I'm talking about the hardcore guys that are 12, 13. My son is 10, getting ready to be 11. He's out here, and he's affiliated with these boys, but he knows I have a strong hold on my son, and I know where he's at all times. So what do you do to help with this problem that we have before I go to my next couple of things and I'll be through?
Well, to answer your question, I am an expert as far as volunteer social services type thing. Anybody who's been in my office has seen all my plaques, certificates, awards, letters, commendations, all that stuff. I've done all that stuff. I've been at the YMCA, Big Brothers. I speak in the schools. I've done youth jamborees at church. I've done it all. I need some help is what I need. I'm tired of being out there by myself. So I am an expert. And this will not be happening to my 2 boys because they're going to get some home training.
Okay,
created with free version for non-commercial use.
You're telling me what you used to do? Are you still doing some of these things?
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Always.
Okay. The only last thing I wanted to say is that, the solution to what we're talking about right here, and Robert, I'm the guy that put the challenge to the church.
Oh, I remember you, Mark.
Okay. Is that the churches and the communities, we must come together. I work in South Dallas. You heard the siren going by? It was going to pick up one of our boys. You heard it going by just a few seconds ago. This is the environment that I work in. This is where I don't live. I live a few miles from here, but I don't live in South Dallas at this moment. Okay? But that siren was going to get one of our boys who'd be out here in this hot heat, drinking this hot beer, his boots form, or whatever the case is. But until the church is I was a teacher at Vacation Bible School, and then we have a reading program at our church year-round. These are the things that our children must be affiliated with in order to give them some type of hope.
All right. Well, Marty, we thank you so much for your comments there. Let's get MT.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
Has arrived. Let's go to MT on line 3.
Really, Robert, thank you. He sounds like he's looking for a program. Man, he done broke in 3 times 90 days. I don't blame his wife. That's our problem, weak men. When I had my problems out here, Dr. Day, they shot at the house. I called the police. The kids was 16. They said it wasn't nothing they could do. They come back again later. And all my neighbors organized, we shot back. We shot back, and guess what? All the shooting was over. The party was over. So we've been happily ever after.
They didn't do anything.
Let people just run over your neighborhood. There's no crack dealers, no dealers on our street. We're not going to have it. And see, that's all I can take care of. My house, house, my neighbors, my street. And that's what brothers need to do.
Okay, MT, let me ask you, but when you shot back, did the police give you any problems or any hassles with shooting back?
Well, didn't nobody call because everybody was on the street.
Okay.
So it wasn't nothing to complain about. And you know how gunfire is going off every night anyway, so it was just like 4th of July. And the problem was over. No more problems. I mean, seriously, and he was angling.
Created with free vision for non-commercial use.
Weak brother, he's strong in what he do, but that's a poor testimony for a black man in society today. Now, I did want to say I agree with Dr. Davidson about the hoodlums and the criminals, but Dr. Davidson, when they whooped Rodney King, we was in an outrage. He broke the law. They whooped him. White folks, the blacks was going crazy and hollering and screaming, but we can condone black-on-black crime. Now, I say this. If they want to whoop those little boys, then call the mother or call Dr. Davidson or call MT and ask us. If we say whoop them, then go ahead on and whoop them. But 50 grown men whooping boys, and these are not gang members. They haven't robbed nobody by gunpoint or pistol whoop nobody. These are young boys who might have a chance, who might need it a whooping. But get the okay from the mother. You just can't. I want to know, Dr. Davidson.
It's Dr. Thomas here.
Dr. Thomas, I'm sorry. Dr. Thomas, if they break into your place, I hear a lot of people okaying with the beating. But if you ever get broke into, would you give permission to your other doctors to whoop young boy? Y'all gonna line up and whoop them? If not, why are we living off the back of the Nation of Islam, somebody who basically don't affiliate with anything that we do? Why are we so in support giving them carte blanche to whoop kids? And why are we so easy to go along with black men, black-on-black crime, and then if it was a white boy, they would burn the mall down. It would just be a mess. So I'm trying to understand this.
All right, MT. We see where you're coming from.
All right.
Thank you now.
Well, one thing MT said, I don't think any less of the caller because he didn't get lucky enough to shoot
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
I don't know what else he could have done. Maybe put an alarm on that house or something. After the second time, that's what I had to do at my office. Very interestingly enough, I had to do the same thing on my street. We had a bunch of hoodlums and criminals over there trying to turn it into a crack house, and I lived in a good neighborhood. But all you need is that one bad house, and it's like a cancer, and you got to cut it out. And I done had to pull my gun out and go outside in broad daylight and run criminals off my street, saying, if you don't live here, you can't come on this street. And they cussed me out and challenged me. One of them said he was going to shoot me, and I said, well, let's do it right now. Let's go. Don't come over here at 3 in the morning to shoot in my house. Don't shoot me in the back when I turn around. Let's go right now. And they back down, because that's all they understand. Dr. Davidson, my neighbor, has seen me packing, and he knows I'm not playing, and I'm not making none of this up.
So you support the concealed carry
so
bill, I would assume.
I was a strong proponent of that, because I'm carrying my gun, because I don't play this stuff no more. I told you, I've been robbed at gunpoint 3 times. There will not be a 4th time.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
They take your car and then shoot you.
All right, let's go to Geraldine Hollins, and she'll get the last word in this segment, and then we'll make a smooth transition on into Dr. Richard Davidson at the Martin Chiropractic Clinic. Ms. Hollins?
Yes, hello, Dr.
Thomas.
Dr. Craig Thomas.
That's me.
Yes, I missed your comments about the mall caning, and I just want to know if you for it or against it before I make my comment.
I'm for it.
Okay, now I heard your comments concerning wife abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now how can you be for, this is one question in my, how can you be for not beating wives, but you for beating children, 60 men beating children? I don't understand that.
Because the wife probably didn't commit no crime. The boys are criminals.
Pardon?
The wife is probably an innocent victim and probably did not commit any type of offense or crime to justify a physical beating. These boys are criminals, and that's the difference, is you got one innocent victim, and then you got criminals being punished on the other hand. It's two separate things.
Well, let me say this. When they were arrested and they were charged
Created
with the crime, the ones
for
that did the
non-commercial
beating.
use.
Now, the community spoke out. Some people were not heard in this thing because they kept a lot of voices silent except for a Robert show. But now, if the community should speak out and they let O.J. go, he's not guilty of anything but abusing his wife. Now, what if folks say wife abuse is okay? I want you to comment on that, because we may be headed somewhere listening to people like you in a danger zone. Because if you're going to condemn 60 men beating on children, you may just turn around once the community cry and say, let's forgive him for beating the woman. You may try and say, yeah, I agree with that too. So can I hear your comments about that? And thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there would be very few situations where you can justify a man beating his wife. The standard one that comes to mind is he's coming home from lunch early and catches her in bed with somebody else. And I think if he hands out a beating, then the law is going to be more lenient than if it's the classic deal of him beating her for no reason. Again, I think you're talking two situations here, where you usually have an innocent
Created
victim
with free version for non-commercial use.
to guilty criminals. Now, they ain't had their trial. They're guilty of sin. And I'm not saying we're going to start going around and caning everybody. I'm not saying that the answer is to beat everybody to a pulp. This thing got a lot of press because it was the people that did it, the Nation of Islam, just like MT said, people we usually don't mess with too much. And it don't make no difference to me whether it was these Nation of Islam brothers or the Black Chamber of Commerce. I don't care. These boys deserve to beating. If I'd have been there, and if it had been my store, I'd have beat them. If they'd have been, if like I say, I got broke into last month for the 4th time in the past 2 years. If we'd have caught them, I think I might have done some illegal activity. I mean, I got to tell you that. People just don't. They fed up. The system is broke. People are frustrated. Very few people care about these criminals. I've said before that I feel I have a pulse on the community because of my involvement and because of the number of people that I come into contact with every day. I have yet
Created
to talk
with
to
free
a person
version for
that
non-commercial
was
use.
opposed to what happened. I have yet to talk to and I'm talking dozens of people. Dozens of people. It's like a barbershop. People coming in there all day, we sitting there talking. It's real. You go down to Graham's barbershop and you got 50 people saying one thing, 2 people saying something else. Well, I listen to them 50 most of the time, and what I'm telling you is that 50 people done been in my place saying they glad them boys got beat. They don't care nothing about the guys that beat them. They like me. If them boys had come to trial, I was going to go make a donation to the defense fund. That's how strongly I felt about it.
Well, Doc, our time is about up here, and Dr. Richard Davidson is in, and you've left him with a lot to deal with because these phones are still ringing here.
I didn't mean to mess you up there.
Well, let's see. Let's get that phone number out and where people can reach you.
Yeah, I don't know if I want people to reach me now. If you have some eye problems, then you can call me at 780-7199, and I'll be glad to look at you.
All right. Well, Dr. Thomas, it's always our pleasure having you to come by.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.
To wonder now, are you going to run for any political
No,
office?
I'm not running for any office. And my staff, when I left today, I said, I'm going to the radio. And they said, are you talking about eyes or are you talking about all the other stuff you're talking about? I said, I just don't know.
Okay. All right, that's Dr. Craig Thomas of First Tech here. I want to thank him for being with us. We're just going to kind of keep things going right here and make this smooth transition on over to Dr. Richard Davidson of the Martin Chiropractic Clinic. And Doc will call you and set you up for next week here while we stay on the air.
Thank you very much, Robert.
All right. Well, first of all, Dr. Richard Davidson.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.